This is Backroads of Illinois, server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Backroads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We were glad you're here on a Thursday afternoon for today. I'm Cesar Delgado. I am your host of today's program. We were talking about the Farm Bill and 45Z guidance line, and such more. Here's Randy Russell about Andrew Hanker from the Russ Group. And then the weather is extremely impactful right now for a few past week in the Midwest, like in Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri. We were talking about it with Drew Lerner from Weather World in Kansas City. Otherwise, this is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold. The tariffs are uncertainty with American ag products and the top trade partners with the United States. However, India is making a deal to buy the U.S. beans and soybean oil to India. The U.S. Meat Federation are watching for port fees to the Asian countries and other countries like in Colombia. Dan Halstorm are watching the trade issue with this issue with the port fees for right now. Finally, Illinois is ahead with the beans planting in central Illinois nearby Champaign area. They are planting beans in 15% ahead on the average. That's your rural news on this afternoon. This is your commodities markets for this afternoon, sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. May corn is down from today at 3 to 5 cents. July corn is down at 5 to 8 cents. May beans are up at 6 to 10 cents. July beans are up at 3 to 8 cents. Kansas City wheat is lower for today. KC May wheat is down at 8 to 6 cents. KC July wheat is down at 5 to 3 cents. Chicago May wheat is down at 3 to 4 cents. Chicago July wheat is down at 4 to 6 cents. June cattle is up at 3 to 6 cents. August cattle is down to 8 to 5 cents. May feeder cattle is up at 5 to 9 cents. July feeder cattle is down at 3 to 6 cents. June hogs is up at 5 to 10 cents. July hogs is up at 4 to 8 cents. That's your commodity markets for this afternoon. We were talking about the Farm Bill and 45Z guidance line, and such more. Here's about Andrew Hanker from the Russ Group. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Cesar, thank you for having me. Look forward to visiting.
Andrew, could you give us an update on the Farm Bill for right now?
Yes, as you know, we are in the second one-year extension of the 2018 Farm Bill. It looks like there's going to be a push to include potentially some portions of the Farm Bill and the tax bill that is starting to move through Congress right now. As part of the tax reconciliation process that's ongoing here in DC, each committee, including the Agriculture Committee, has been given instructions to identify certain levels of savings or in some cases spending to contribute to the overall tax bill process. So the House Ag Committee has been asked to cut $230 billion as part of that process, given that the overwhelming majority of the Agriculture Committee's budget is made up of Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the food stamp program. That will be a primary piece that goes into the reconciliation process. But there's also indications that in addition to the SNAP provisions that go into reconciliation, you could also see other pieces of the Farm Bill, potentially the commodity programs, crop insurance, and maybe some others. Now, a lot of this is up in the air, but I do think that the general ag community is kind of preparing that some of those items, things like reference prices, and again, crop insurance, could be included as part of that overall tax package that is moving this year. The president has indicated that he would like for that tax package to be wrapped up by July 4th. Now, that's a very ambitious timeline, but that is what the Congress has been tasked with doing. So I would say potentially next week we could see some movement on the ag portion of the tax reconciliation package. And so we are keeping our eyes out for that potential, some of that movement to happen next week, beginning next week.
What is the fundamentals on the Farm Bill for right now with CPR and crop insurance?
Yeah, and I think that there has been a lot of push on increasing reference prices in Title I, making some modifications to crop insurance. And there, as we think about what were growers asking for as the Farm Bill process has been moving these last couple of years, one of the biggest items that was requested was increasing funding for MAP and FMD, the Market Access Program, and the Foreign Market Development. Outside of that, increasing reference prices seem to be the next grower request, and then shoring up some of the crop insurance provisions. Those seem to be the biggest items that have risen to the top as far as asks from the industry as the Farm Bill has been rewritten. But as you know, 2018 was the last time that the Farm Bill was reauthorized, so there's been a lot of time to think and ask export more than we do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any concerns about the beans farmers on their products in the future, like with the waterways in the Mississippi River?
Yeah, so I think I heard you right about concern about beans and exports. Obviously, exports are critical to a lot of commodities, certainly for beans. When there have through the years been challenges with access, through our nation's waterways, locks and dams, or that critical waterways infrastructure is just essential for making sure products can get from the Midwest, where our great farmers produce them, to export opportunities, whether that's the Pacific Northwest or whether that's the Gulf. And I think the waterways infrastructure is critical there. Thankfully, Congress did pass last year an updated WRDA bill, the Water Resources Development Act, which carries a lot of the funding for all the Army Corps projects. And so I think you hit it, that those key, often items we don't think about, locks and dams and waterways and dredging, that is a key component to making sure that U.S. agriculture remains competitive on the global market, because it takes a lot of effort to get that grain in particular from where it's grown to where it's exported and then to its final destination.
Do you have any concerns about the commodities markets with the stocks markets? Andrew?
Yeah, so there's so many factors to consider when you think about markets. A lot of things we've talked about, these U.S. policies that are still outstanding, right? The Farm Bill, tariffs, trade negotiations, the tax policy, where that lands, that all plays a key role in determining where things land from a commodity markets perspective. So, I think right now we do not have a lot of clarity. We do not have a lot of certainty. Many of those items are just not yet resolved or at a point where we can predict where they will land. But I do think as we get to July, when we see a lot of these self-imposed or man-made deadlines for things like tax reform, which we talked about, targeting a very ambitious July 4th target date, or the pause in the reciprocal tariffs, which will end July 8th. I think it's also as some of these bilateral trade agreements start getting reached, hopefully over the next few months, as those things happen, then I think we'll start to have a little more certainty to the markets. I expect by the end of summer, we'll have a lot clearer picture for everybody.
Do you follow the beef markets for your work at the Ross Group?
We do follow the beef markets. So, one thing we do here is we send around prices at the end of each day so that we're all attuned where things stand. And certainly as you think about the commodity markets, that's one that has enjoyed a recent season of positivity, with cattle prices being very strong. I don't have the capacity or expertise to project how long that trend remains, but we certainly have been observing those and seen those stand out in the midst of some, would have been some challenges for some of the other commodities.
What is your final thoughts about in the agricultural industry with economic uncertainty?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity to visit. You've got some real great questions that we've been able to talk through. I think the final word would just be, keep an eye out these next few months for some of these key major policies, whether it's tax or trade or farm bill. I do think that in the coming months, we'll have a clearer picture of where some of these items are headed. Now, it may take longer than that, but I'm just going to be optimistic if that's okay. I feel like there's not quite enough optimism out there, but I do think that, I'm encouraged by, the tenacity of American agriculture. So that does force me to a certain level of optimism. And I do think that, we'll get through some of these unclear times, whether it's coming from Washington, D.C., or whether it's coming, from the good Lord and weather. I do think we'll get through those. But I would just say keep an eye out these next few months. You're doing exactly what I think everybody should be doing, and that's asking key questions about what's happening in D.C. that have real critical impacts on folks in the countryside.
Thanks, Andy.
Cesar, thank you for having me. Pleasure visiting with you. All the best in the rest of this season.
We've been talking with Andrew Anker from the Ross Group on back roads of Illinois. The weather is extremely impactful right now for a few past week in the Midwest, like in Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri. We were talking about it with Drew Lerner from Weather World in Kansas City. Hey, Drew, how are you?
I am good. I'm good. I hope that you have managed to deal with the severe weather relatively well. I know there has been a lot of it around, and it looks like we're probably going to see a little bit quieter
Mm,
weather in a while.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, we were cooler than a few days ago.
Absolutely. The temperatures have come down. It's that contrast in temperature that has created the severe weather that we've been seeing here in recent weeks. And it's been a very active season so far. The number of tornadoes and severe weather reports are well above the norm for this time of the year. And it's all because of a contrast in air mass characteristics, including the temperatures and the relative humidity. And that has created an environment here where we have seen indeed a lot of severe weather. The majority of the most active weather has been progressing to the northwest over the past few weeks and last couple of months, with the most active weather occurring back in February in the southeastern part of the country. And in more recent weeks, those severe weather reports have been increasing and shifting to the northwest, so that in the month of March, the severe weather was most greatest from the northern part of Arkansas into southern Michigan and parts of Indiana and Ohio. There was also severe weather that occurred in Alabama and Mississippi. That was in March. In April, the severe weather has expanded further, reaching out into the U.S. plains, while at the same time continuing to occur frequently across parts of the lower Ohio River Basin area and the northern parts of the Delta. And just in the month of April, there have been 328 tornado reports, and I saw an unconfirmed average of about 152 for the month of April. So the number of tornadoes is way above average. The same can be said about severe reports of wind and even hail, both of which are well above the norm as well. And we're probably going to see this continuing, but it will be more concentrated on the southern parts of the country, probably the southern plains into the Delta and the lower parts of the Midwest as we move forward through the first half of May.
Like yesterday in Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, they get some flooding in central U.S.
That's right. Some of the severe thunderstorms have been associated with training thunderstorms, where you get one storm following another. And some of the rainfall that has occurred across parts of Oklahoma in the past couple of weeks has been substantial. There are some areas during the month of April that have reported between 10 and 15 inches of rain. And not only was that in Oklahoma, but it did extend off to the northeast into parts of Illinois, Indiana, and parts of the northern Delta. And within that 10 to 15-inch range of rainfall, there were some local totals that reached up over or between 15 and 20 inches. So you're absolutely right. It has been extremely wet and stormy from Oklahoma and parts of Texas right on into the Ohio River Basin. And we are going to see more rain. It looks like as we go into the early part, actually most of next week, we will likely encounter additional moderate to heavy rain in the central and southern plains from Kansas and parts of Colorado into Texas. And some of that will work its way eastward into the Delta as well. So more wet and stormy weather is in store for those areas.
How about the severe weather in the Midwest? Could we see that for next week ahead?
Most of the Midwest is expecting to take a little bit of a break from the rainfall and the severe weather. Now, when I talk about the Midwest, in this particular case, I'm talking about the Great Lakes region southward into central Illinois, central Indiana, and parts of Ohio. Those areas should see a drier bias after we get through the day on Friday or early Saturday morning. So we've got some scattered showers around over these next couple of days, and then we will be seeing a drier scenario. And the odds are good that we'll go through most of next week without any serious amount of rainfall occurring across that region. And again, that would be well, actually, we can include the Northern Plains. So the Northern Plains, the upper Midwest, most of the Great Lakes region, and points southward into central Illinois, central Indiana, and most of Ohio. Those areas will all see a drier tendency after Friday night or Saturday.
I'm curious about the weather with some tornadoes and some flooding in Kentucky. What is your thoughts on this weather? Because we were seeking a relief from that.
Yeah, and it has been stormy in that particular area for quite a bit of the month of April. And even back in March, there was some severe weather that occurred in that area, and a relief is certainly needed and would be welcome if it were to occur. Right now, it looks like with the drier weather that's coming on, we will see some improvement, or at least a reduction in the number of severe weather incidents in Kentucky and maybe some areas immediately to the north, north of the Ohio River in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, and parts of southwestern Ohio. But areas to the south will probably still have a risk of severe weather once in a while. It doesn't look like the atmosphere is going to be quite as unsettled as it was. And so the number of storms may back off a little bit, at least in the first half of May. But for Kentucky in particular, a break, I think, is coming. There should be less precipitation and more sunshine, more stability in the atmosphere after we get through the weekend coming up. So next week in particular, it should be better.
How about in the northern Illinois on next couple weeks, Drew?
Yeah, the biggest issue in northern Illinois is probably going to be the drier tendency that's going to evolve. It's not going to be dry in a negative sense. I think it's going to be a very good environment for aggressive planting to take place across that region. And as long as the weather ends up verifying, there should be good progress made. Now, a fair amount of northern Illinois and some immediate neighboring areas in Indiana and eastern Iowa and on up into Wisconsin and Michigan, those areas will be trending drier as we get closer to mid-May. And so even though the severe weather risk is going to drop off, so is the rainfall. And it will be warmer during this time period. And therefore, the need for timely rain will be on the rise in the second half of May. But this is the planting season, and having a stretch of dry weather right now is perfect for getting crops in the ground, as long as there's going to be some timely rain resuming as we get into the second half of May and on into June. And right now, I think that is likely to occur, although the rain amounts may be a little lighter than normal, and that may worry a few producers for a while until better rains come back into the region.
Can you tell us what's your final thoughts about the severe weather in central Midwest?
Yeah, I think the bottom line here is that it has been a very stormy season. I do think that we're going to see the storms return for a brief period of time later. Most likely it'll be in late May or June when that occurs. And they probably won't be quite as numerous as they have been in the past few weeks. But nonetheless, I do expect some cooler air to try to drop down from Canada through the northern half of the Midwest in late May and maybe the first days of June, and that will set the stage for some more severe weather. But for sure, this has been a very stormy start to the season. And if you go back and look at the statistics, they usually suggest that when you have a very active spring season, the number of severe storms is usually higher than usual through the entire year. So we'll see if that verifies in the next few months.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you, and good luck to you. Have a great day.
This is Drew Lerner from Weather World on Back Roads of Illinois. Thanks to Andrew Hanker and Randy Russell from the Ross Group and Drew Lerner from Weather World. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. You have a good day.